question about what's different about gas and oil from shale, the second most important, actually the most important, but second aspect of the problem is that because the shale is impermeable and doesn't want to easily give up its gas or oil, you need to drill a lot of wells, closely spaced. Get this, parallel wells 500 feet apart forever, as far as the eye can see, in every direction in the Marcellus Shale. That's the industry objective. Let me repeat that. The industry objective in the Marcellus Shale or the Utica is to drill parallel wells, each a mile or two long, roughly 500 feet apart, in every direction, north, south, east, west, as far as the eye can see. So now you have each well being 100 times more consumptive of frac fluid and producing much more waste than any traditional well. And you multiply that big number by another big number, which is the number of wells, and pretty soon you have a very, very big number in terms of impact. So again, we're sitting across the Delaware River from Pennsylvania. I just drove through Susquehanna County this morning to get here. And Susquehanna County probably has a few hundred shale gas wells at this point. They're only about 7 or 8% of the way. The Marcellus Shale play is the youngest, largest, least developed shale play in the U.S. It's still on the upswing because they have so few wells. They've only drilled maybe 7,000 wells and they've only put maybe half of those into production. So any indications that we've had to date of impact on private drinking water wells, on local environment, on methane emissions, impacting climate change, it's just the tip of the iceberg in Pennsylvania. By the time Pennsylvania is done, it will be a very, very significant producer of bad things on a global scale.
As you commented on to me previously, there's a lot of focus on fracking, or at least use of the words fracking. But I think that it might be helpful for folks to hear what more broad, what are the array of harms that get inflicted on the environment and on communities when shale gas development comes into town?
So down 6, 7, 8,000 feet, a lot of fracking going on. Yes, there is a possibility of that fracking having a near-term impact because the frac fluid might migrate upwards for many different reasons, many different mechanisms. You've heard them all. Existing fault planes, existing fracture systems, abandoned unknown gas wells and oil wells. These are all possible events. Not zero probability, but low probability compared to others. Come up a couple thousand feet. In order to get the well down there to frack, you had to drill a well. So even though fracking per se is not the primary problem, in order to frack, you got to drill a well. It's the drilling of the wells and the casing and cementing of the wells, or the problems with drilling, casing, and cementing, that is a much higher probability of causing problems with groundwater and with methane emissions. So the industry has known since the first time they drilled, cased, and cemented the well that casing and cementing a well is a problem. It's really difficult to gasket a hole once you drilled a hole in a pressure vessel. Okay? The earth is a pressure vessel. There's shale gas and shale oil down there under tremendous pressure. It wants to get out. It's been migrating out for hundreds of millions of years very slowly because the holes in the system are very, very small. But now we go into a whole county in Pennsylvania, for example, and drill 10,000 holes. And the gas is saying, whoopee, here I come. Unless you can gasket those holes, any leak that you create, I'm out of here. At high pressure and at high rate. So, you know, blow up a balloon, start punching holes in it. Okay. If you can gasket those holes real quickly, you poke a hole, and if you put a gasket around the hole so that nothing can leak around the thing that you poked in there, fine. What do we use for gasket material? Hardened cement paste. Well, why? It's cheap. It's easy to acquire. It's relatively easy to get down there, but it's not a really good gasket material from the point of view of flexibility and impermeability and ability to adjust to earth movements and to not age over time. So a very high probability, a certainty, I don't want to talk about probabilities, it is an absolute certainty that a very significant percentage of all gas and oil wells that have ever been drilled are currently leaking. Industry estimates somewhere around 30 to 40% of all oil and gas wells that ever drilled are leaking right now, as we sit here. It's well known. The industry knows it. Regulators know it. It's equally well known that since that's the history, that's the future. Because there's no technology that's coming on the line right now that's going to drastically change that picture. They're always going to be slightly improving the technology, slightly improving the cement mixtures, slightly improving the ability to repair leaking wells, but there's not going to be any game changer. So in the last 3 years in Pennsylvania, with the 7,000 shale gas wells that were drilled in the Marcellus, between 5 and 10% of them were leaking from day one. And I can tell you right now, based on statistics that we've derived from the Pennsylvania Department of Environmental Protection publicly available database on the history of all the gas and oil wells drilled in Pennsylvania, I can tell you in all the wells in Marcellus in Pennsylvania that were drilled in 2010, between 2010 and today, 10% of them have already started leaking. So these are not old wells, right? And a lot of those were leaking right after they finished cementing them. So in terms of your original question, what are the impacts beyond fracking? A certainty is that a very significant percentage of all the shale gas wells will leak. So what? They can leak into underground sources of drinking water. Your private drinking water well will be contaminated. Over 1,000 families in Pennsylvania in the last 4 years have complained to the Pennsylvania Department of Environmental Protection that their water well has been contaminated. Over 1,000. Pennsylvania DEP has determined in 160 of those cases that absolutely certainly, yeah, your water well got contaminated. 160 families. No, actually 160 incidents. More than 160 families. Probably way over 200 families have lost access to their water wells. And remember, that's only 6 or 7% of the action in Pennsylvania. So multiply that number by 15 or 16, and that'll give you a picture of how many families will lose their water wells in Pennsylvania. Why should we think it would be any different in the Delaware River Basin? It's the same companies using the same technology, same protocols, same cement, same casing. So it's a certainty that water wells will be contaminated.